Hello there, my name's Tim Walter. I'm a house healer and an alternative life coach. And today we're looking at part 2 of the program that we started a couple of weeks ago on pendulum dowsing. Later on in this program we're going to be showing why it's important to set up a good line of thought to get the correct question string so that you can narrow down and get answers to absolutely anything. We're going to be looking at why dowsing is a question and answer, a twofold process. And we're looking at why sometimes you have to be just ridiculously specific in exactly how you ask the questions, what words you use. Now, not only that, we'll also be looking at answering a couple of the questions that you've raised for me and looking at protection, the importance of getting into the habit of putting in psychic protection before you start dowsing each time. So before we get into the bulk of program 2, if you haven't watched program 1, please click on that link and have a look, because that's more of an introduction to pendulum dowsing. And this one we'll look at dowsing in general as well as using the pendulum. So all of that coming up. A few bits of YouTube housekeeping first of all before we get stuck in. Usual things. If you'd like to subscribe to the channel, please click on the red subscribe icon and the grey bell. That enables you to get notified every time I upload a video, which I'm hoping is twice a week these days. The other thing is also click on the thumbs up or the thumbs down if you like or you're not so keen on the content of each video. Leave a comment, and all of these things, these interactions, help YouTube identify that actually this channel is becoming more and more popular, which it is. So thank you very much indeed for your continued support. And do ask all the questions that you want to know about dowsing, spirit world, intentional living, creating your own reality, all of these things, house healing, personal development work, all of these sort of things that we're dealing with on this channel. Absolutely everybody can dowse. Some people say, you know, I can't do that. But they can. Everybody has the ability to dowse. And don't forget, I said in part 1, it took me 3 days of constant practice, constant trying to actually get my rods in the first place to actually move. So it's not necessarily something that's going to happen straight away. And certainly for sure, if you're using rods or a pendulum, you're not going to get a strong reaction to start with. But even when you get the slightest one, then that's a good place to start. And all it takes is practice, 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 and a little bit more practice. Okay, so as some of you will know, I got into dowsing because I encountered in a house that we moved into some years ago, some 20 years ago or so now, the ghost of a deceased lady. And the people that I got in to help me deal with that, to understand what was going on, they used dowsing rods. And that was the first time I'd experienced dowsing. That made me pick up dowsing, and I spent 15 years talking to this spirit of this deceased lady who shared the house with us. But the thing was, I started dowsing in that way as a conversation. So I used to use dowsing in a spiritual way. Some people get a little bit spooked by the idea of that because they get very concerned about, oh, maybe there's going to be an evil entity that comes and takes me over. I can say pretty well for sure by now, after 20 or so years, that actually the existence of evil entities for the novice dowser is a 0.1% chance of being of something happening like that. And in fact, of course, it's nothing like the Hollywood movies or television. Detrimental energy, yes, you can be affected by, and that's why at the end of this program I'll be telling you which psychic protection exercise to utilize and get in the habit of putting in place before you start dowsing every time. Detrimental energy is a very different thing to being taken over, being possessed by an evil spirit. Don't worry about the latter. We'll talk more about that in due course. It's not anything to be taken lightly, but equally it's nothing to be worried about for the novice dowser. The thing is, the really big important thing about dowsing is that it's a 2-stage process. You have to ask a specific question and get a specific result. It's as simple as that. Think of it like using a computer. If you just go and sit at a computer, at your desk or on your smartphone, if you just hold it, nothing happens. If you just sit at your desk, nothing happens. You've got to touch the keyboard, you've got to press the pad to make something happen. Same with dowsing. You've got to press the pad, you've got to ask the question for a specific response. So, With dowsing, obviously you're looking for a yes or a no response, but sometimes you want to ask questions that are simply not encompassed by yes or no. So what do? Well, if we look at something like this house, for example, and let's say I didn't know anything about this house, so therefore I wanted to dowse to find out how old it was. First thing I would do in an old house like this is ask the question, was the house all built at the same time? And I get the answer of no. Okay, so I know that I've got different aspects of the house, different parts of the house were built at different times. What I would then ask is the part where my office is now the oldest part of the building? And the answer is yes. Okay, so I know, let me just ask another question. Was the other section of the house built at the same time? No, it wasn't. So are there two stages to the development of the other section of the house? More or less. More or less is what I'm getting there. They're giving me some leeway on that because that's the way I dowse. I get feelings and I get almost like being told a response. So what we've basically got, for the sake of this demonstration, what we've basically got is a house that was built in two sections. We'll use that as an example, okay? So immediately what we've established is that we're going to be asking about one section of the building and we're going to be asking about the other section of the building. If I'd gone straight in with asking about the general building, I might well have got a response that said, meh, I don't understand what you mean. What are you asking? So we're asking a general question to start with and then narrowing it down. So now I'm going to ask about the oldest part of the building. I'm going to ask, please, we want to ask about how old the oldest part of the building is. That's fine for the purposes of this demonstration on the video. So therefore, is the part of the building where my office is that over 800 years old? No. Right. So is it over 200 years old? Yes. So is it over 500 years old? No. Is it approximately 500 years old? Yes. So it's just slightly under 500 years, isn't it? Yeah, okay, fine. So it's just slightly under 500 years old, right. So therefore we know, is it between 490 years and 500 years old? Yes. So is it between 495? No. So is it between 490 and 495 years old? So is it therefore 490, 491, 492? 492 years old. Started going when I said 491 because actually I was thinking ahead to 492, and then because of the video I actually thought, oh hang on, what do I want to do here? But 492, so it's 492 years old. So I'm just going to make a note of that. So it's 492 years old, the oldest part. The other section of the building, let's ask the question there. Is the other section of the building the main part, the biggest part of the building? Broadly speaking, putting those two parts together, is that over 500 years old? Is that over 200 years old? Is that over 300 years old? Is that over 400 years old? No. So is it over 350 years old? Yes. So it's between 350 years old and 400 years old. So is it over 360 years old? Is it over 370 years old? Is it over 380 years old? So it's 370. So is it over 375? So is it 375, 376, 377? So 377 years old. Okay? So you can do that kind of process with numbers, narrowing down the field to find what you want. You can do that with depth of things if you're looking for something, buried treasure for instance, or minerals or water. If you want to find out how deep the flow is or the item that you're looking for, you just kind of narrow down the options. So what we're doing there, broadly speaking, is starting a question string that narrows down very, very quickly from a broad question to establish the base in a yes or no fashion, down to a very specific. Remember, you have to ask a question to get a response. Okay, so that, as I say, is the question string. Now you remember in the introduction I said we're also going to be looking at why sometimes we have to ask ridiculously specific questions. The language we use has to be ridiculously specific. It's something about dowsing and we don't really know why, but occasionally there's a pernicketiness sometimes about dowsing, about that it's almost like the subconscious or the universe or spirit, however we want to regard whatever it is we're asking the question of. It's almost like they are being just incredibly fussy. So we have to face that and we have to be very, very specific in what we're looking for. So for example, if I was thinking about, it's not a terribly good example perhaps, but if I was thinking about putting a replacement window in the back of the house, It's a practical use for dowsing, so I would dowse. I would ask the house itself, in fact, would it be happy with a replacement window? But I wouldn't just ask a general question like that. I would say, would the house be happy with a replacement window made of softwood? And I would get a yes or a no. Would the house be happy with a replacement window made of hardwood? Yes or no. Would the house be happy with an Akoya double glazed window, perhaps? What I'm saying is I wouldn't specifically ask the 3 different questions. We're not talking about a question string here. What I would do would be I would have a feeling of what I wanted to do with the window. And in this case, I'm actually thinking about replacing it with an Akoya wood double glazed window. And so therefore I would ask the question, if I wanted to, of the house and be that specific. I would say, would the house be happy with an Akoya double glazed window? And I would probably specify the manufacturer that's going to make it for us. Those 3 things. And that really is asking a very specific itemized question. Okay, so you can apply that to all sorts of things that you're actually asking for. If you get the response on the pendulum that actually is just like hanging there going, well, I don't know what you mean, or I'm not answering that, or something like that, then sometimes it is because you're not being specific enough. The other thing to be really careful of, whether you're using a pendulum or a dowsing rod, is actually making sure that your mind is focused on what you're actually saying. So if I was talking again about the replacement window, I don't actually want to be thinking about what I'm going to feed the dog for this evening's meal, because clearly there's a conflict of intention there, and that will confuse your dowsing results as well in itself. So always try to be aware of what you're thinking or how you're tuning into what it is you're looking for, and try to make sure that that is what you're focusing on as you're saying the question. If you find the need to ask a question again, try to rephrase it a little bit. Asking exactly the same question in exactly the same tone, in exactly the same way, will just mean you link to exactly the opposite answer. It's inevitable. I'll explain why that is in another video, or why I believe it is, but for sure that always happens. You ask a question once and you're not sure, you think, oh, I'll ask that again. You ask it in exactly the same way, thinking about exactly the same thing, you get the other result. Don't worry about why, just slightly change the question. Now there's also the fact that you go through a phase, as I said in another dowsing video, you go through a phase where you seem to get continually the wrong answers. I go along with my dear old mentor Hamish Miller on this, which is that he reckoned if he got 80% of his dowsing accurate, then he would be happy. And do you know what? If you think about the amount of decisions that you make during a day on anything, not when you're dowsing, just normal daily, day-to-day life, the amount of decisions you make, the amount of choices you take, and how many days do you go through, or even hours do you go through, where 100% of the decisions and the actions you take are absolutely perfect. Yeah, doesn't actually happen that often. You know, how often do you reach out for something and you pick it up and you half pick it up and you drop it, or you knock something off the table, or, you know, you get up and you forget that you've got something and you trip over something, you know, all of these little things. These are just kind of like not quite right. Same with dowsing. Just because we're working with the subtle realms does not mean to say that the information that's coming into us that we're able to pick up is going to be 100% perfect. And this is partly why, although I know for sure that I'm getting about 80% on the house healing work, on the floor plans, on identifying where things are, and very often the clients can verify what we're picking up, we use it as a guide. And we allow some flexibility from the management when we're doing the rebalancing work. But also, if I'm working with a client, we're using dowsing in the life coaching process, and we're looking at a series of questions about helping the person through the next phase of their life. I do recommend to the person, the client, that we actually take the dowsing as a guide. We don't take it as solid fact from the universe to be stuck to without questioning. It's a guide, and there's lots of influences that can be added into the mix. But what it does do is it absolutely helps the person get a feeling for the way they want to move forward in their life. And that's the crucial thing. It's using your intuition. And let's face it, none of us are perfect. So look, Although this is titled a video about pendulum dowsing, really we've talked about dowsing as a whole, because everything that I've talked about here applies to whether we use a rod, a bobber, or a stick, or the pendulum itself. I said earlier on that we were going to look at the importance of psychic protection every time you dowse, and really that is something you should be doing, especially if you're either dowsing sacred sites on the ground or remotely. Really get in the habit of using psychic protection, and there's a link in the corner of the screen to the video that shows you a really good method. Particularly for highly sensitive people, it's a really good exercise to use before you step out of the house every day. For dowsers and for novice dowsers, it's a great methodology to get in the habit of using, because it means that if you do ever encounter some detrimental energy, then you're ready for it, you're prepared for it. So you're not going to end up with headaches or feeling like you're completely zonked out, or that perhaps you're going the other way and you're getting really manic and hyper, or the fact that sometimes you suddenly can't sleep. All of these things are indicative of picking up detrimental energy if you haven't been experiencing them before you've done a dowsing session, okay? So just bear that in mind. Okay, that's basically it, and I hope those things have been useful. So remember, do subscribe, do click the thumbs up or the thumbs down, do click the grey bell icon as well, and I'll be seeing you again very soon. Until then, take care.